We're here with Hannah Richardson, EMEA Ad Research and Insights Lead at Snap. How are you, Hannah?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thank you. So why is attention important?
So I guess marketing and advertising has always been about grabbing the attention of consumers, right? In order to get them to buy your products. And I think that hasn't changed and it won't change. If your ads don't get noticed, then, how can we expect them to make an impact or a change in perception with our consumers? I think the measurement of attention itself as a metric, we know, has become like a huge topic of interest over the last kind of couple of years or so. And I think the reason for that is because it allows us to look beyond impressions and viewability and focus on real consumer engagement, right? And that can only be to the benefit of like media planning, media buying, but also when we're thinking about measurement. It's a much more reliable measure, I think, of engagement and consumer interaction than something like viewability, which is just giving you the opportunity to see, right? Rather than whether someone has actually seen it or engaged it. And I think focusing on that real human response to something really allows us to focus on giving credit where credit is due and avoiding overestimating the effectiveness of certain placements, certain formats, certain things that might not actually be being viewed at all. I think another reason is that there's obviously been a lot of work done so far to prove the effectiveness of attention, like as an outcome or in driving outcomes. So namely mental availability, sales uplift, and kind of, leading through to profitability, which is obviously the most important thing when it kind of comes to brands. And I think that's particularly important because although there's an abundance of impressions and we're being faced with more and more advertising all the time, we know that attention spans are getting shorter. People have got less time and less focus to be spending on things. So it's more important than ever for us to focus really on quality and creating quality ads that are going to drive that impact.
In industry events, in conversations with advertisers and media agencies and publishers, it seems like this moment in time, attention has become more of a discussion point. There's more activity around it. Is it related to, companies starting to really put this into practice as opposed to just in the research lab, or why is attention being discussed more now, and what is unique about this moment where there's an opportunity to really implement it?
I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. It definitely does seem like it's kind of one of the hot topics of the moment. I think a lot of that and a lot of the kind of conversations that are happening, really, I think that there's kind of two sides to what people are talking about, right? The research side, which is proving the value of attention specifically for your brand, your platform, your channel, etc., etc. And I do think that's probably where most of the focus seems to have been so far. I think attention could be said to still be relatively nascent, right? In terms of there's a long way to go to get us to an end point, whatever that might look like, that people are kind of in agreement around. And I think then the other side is there's a lot of conversations about, can we start to implement attention-based buying, or attention as a buying measure and using it for activation? And I think there's probably a little bit further to go in terms of that one, because there's a lot more that is needed, I think, to make sure that we're being fair, and we can be consistent in how that's being used, so that it's something that is valid and can kind of feed into measurement in the future.
And when we talk about attention, there's obviously the ability to measure creative sort of in a vacuum, and then there's the media in which it runs. Is it important for them to work together, or do you think they should be sort of viewed separately?
100% need to work together. I think there's been, if you look generally at overall advertising effectiveness, there's been a lot of studies that look into what those drivers of effectiveness are, right? And creative is a huge, huge driver of advertising impact. And I think by just focusing on media or placement or format or something like that, you're only giving yourself half the opportunity to really build that quality and kind of drive that impact with your consumer. I think, if we think of attention as essentially as like a measure of advertising quality, I guess, there are so many different factors that influence that. So you've got like, the platform or the environment that advertising sits within. You've got the format itself and the kind of content. Then you've got the creative, you've got the message, like all of those things need to be understood. I think the impact on attention from all of those different elements need to be understood in order for us to make sure that we can be as effective as possible. And I think that's something that at Snap we've been trying to do. I think we've definitely so far have focused more on the kind of the research and the building up that evidence base specifically for Snap as a platform and kind of who we work with in order to understand all of those different elements. And I think once we've done that, then you can start thinking about, okay, if we're now going to think about it in terms of measurement or something like that, what are the next steps and what does that look like?
Obviously, there's a lot of organizations, platforms such as Snap that are really have leaned into attention. For those in the overall industry, brands, media agencies that that maybe have started dipping their toe into it or are worried about being left behind, what is the best advice for them to sort of start executing or start learning more about it?
So I guess my advice would be to be open, but also quite methodological in your kind of approach, right? And not try and run before you can walk. I think it's important to really understand like what attention means. So not just for the industry, but for your brand, your platform, or whatever your particular circumstance might be. And then kind of work consistently to generate that evidence base that is relevant to you and your particular circumstance. I guess as you'd like think of it more of like an attention learning agenda that can kind of inform your future effectiveness rather than like a race to the finish line where you have to have the answers to everything. Because I think generally, if we think about, where attention measurement is today, as I mentioned before, we're on a journey, right? And I think we're kind of at the beginning end of that journey. And there's a lot of work and a lot of understanding that still needs to be done to make sure it's something that can be hugely valuable, I think, in the future.
Thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you so much.